I'd like to share with you examples of two simple technologies that we've applied to our work with runaway and homeless youth in Vermont. But before I do, I'm going to reinforce the message that Ashley delivered just prior to lunch and invite you to consider the notion that technology is not a talent, it's a practice. And what I mean by that is that so often we don't want to fully commit ourselves to doing something until we're already good at it. But the way we get good at it is by trying, experimenting, tinkering, and sometimes failing, and then regrouping and trying again. Now, I think that philosophy actually holds true for most everything in life. Driving, communication, love, and it most definitely applies to technology. So one of the things we struggled with in our work is not just engaging youth, but maintaining consistent communication with them. Communication is, of course, essential in building any relationship, but for youth who haven't had many experiences with adults in their lives who are dependable and trustworthy, communication is critical. Dan mentioned that youth are now using text messaging as their primary method of communication. The statistic is actually that Pew Research found was 83% identified text messaging as their primary method of communication. That far surpasses any other method. Now, we actually had some debate within our statewide coalition about adopting text messaging as a case management tool. I'll sort of generalize the two perspectives. One perspective saw primarily risks around boundaries and privacy. The other perspective advocated for using the tools that youth want to use. We went with the latter, and as a result, the average number of contacts between youth and case managers went from 1 or 2 a week to multiple times per day. And I know that's not just our experience alone. Auberly, a youth service agency in Pittsburgh, did a research project last year with the University of Pittsburgh and found one case where a youth care worker and youth had exchanged more than 70,000 text messages over the course of 2 years. I think that illustrates the deep, meaningful communication that can happen over text messaging. So some of the benefits that we've discovered since using text messaging as a primary case management tool is that it's a simple, easy way to be on the youth's level. It also promotes trauma-informed communication. For example, you can let a youth know that the content of a conversation you want to have with them and then give them the power to choose when they're ready to talk about it. It also allows youth to put their words and thoughts and feelings into writing instead of talking about it, which is easier for a lot of youth. Another benefit of text messaging uses 0 minutes on a phone plan. And that's a significant deal for a lot of our youth who've had limited time on their phone plans. And finally, text messaging works with just 1 bar of service. Now, this may not be an issue for some of you guys, but in rural states like Vermont, a big deal. This is actually a picture of my hometown, Montpelier, Vermont. That's the whole town, by the way. And that's the state capital of Vermont. In town, I have great service, but go just a few miles outside of town, and service gets spotty. So with text messaging, you can send and receive a message in places you may not be able to have a call. So along with some of the benefits of text messaging, we have learned some lessons that I want to share with you around practice. The first is to simply ask the youth if they use text and if you can text with them. Second, we strongly encourage you to use an agency phone for text messaging with youth, not a personal phone. And we've learned it's a good idea to talk with youth beforehand about any content they may not want you to share over a text message. Sometimes they're afraid a friend or partner may intercept it. For example, let's just say that someone on this stage is a fan of the show My Little Pony. Now, I may be fine talking with Hedda about Applejack and Rainbow Dash, but I may not want to text with her about that for fear all of the rest of you would know. Too late. Related to that, you'll want to set boundaries and sort of expectations around messaging up early on. So for example, our youth care workers will tell a youth, you can text me anytime, but if you text me at night, I'm not going to respond until the next morning. Then you'll need to follow through with whatever boundaries you set. If you tell a youth you're not going to text them on the weekends or at night, and then you do anyway, you've just lost your boundary and any credibility around that. Sometimes the old-fashioned way actually makes more sense. If a youth is not responding, or if you feel like you need to hear their voice, caseworkers will just pick up the phone and call a youth. And then finally, it's difficult to read tone in a text message. So our youth care workers have learned that it's best before responding to a message to clarify sort of where the youth is in their head when they wrote something. The second technology I want to tell you about is geographic information systems mapping. Now this opportunity sort of fell into our lap. I got a call from a college student who told me that he wanted to create a GIS map of homeless youth in Vermont. This was one of those occasions when I learned it's sometimes good to say yes to an invitation, like Pastor Childer said this morning, before you even know what it really is. And I'm actually going to win a bet right now with Megan and say, I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. But what you're looking at is a map of Vermont that reflects concentrations of youth homelessness. This is a powerful visual aid in our storytelling about youth homelessness in Vermont. Rural states, and I'm sure many of you who live in rural states can identify with this, the homeless youth are largely invisible, even to people who live within our state. So attempting to articulate this is a real issue in our state, it's helpful to have visual aids. And Ann mentioned this morning about how you can't really have a picture with data. This is as close as I've gotten to being able to have a picture to represent data that really brings data to life for people. There's lots of other applications for GIS mapping. And as I was listening to Dan's conversation about the way they use text messaging for incoming calls as an incoming tool, I've seen some applications being developed around locating youth and locating resources for youth so they can easily find things using GIS mapping. So there's lots of potential applications. And I encourage you to experiment with them and use your own technologies in your work. And I'll end where I began by saying that technology and using technology is really not a talent or reserved strictly for the millennials. It's a practice. So go play.